there's very steady growth, and then there'll be a burst event, and then you try and track down which episode that is, and then try and find out if there's chatter about it on the web.
And you can try and find out if there's any way that you can replicate that again. Is that something I can do again? Yeah. I think, it's neat. I love being able to take events, whether or not there's been a mention somewhere on the web, whether or not we had an interview or whatever, and being able to pinpoint that with the statistics and be able to see how it grows. There's another, if you do get into podcasting and you want to do it for and you want to get into advertising and find people to advertise on your podcast, there's a company called Podtrac. And Podtrac actually has one of the best analytics systems out there, and you basically insert a redirect between your feed, your file, and the downloader. So the request goes through Podtrac before and on the way back. And so they keep track of all the information. They also have basically a mass advertising thing where they say, okay, we have these podcasts that have 100 people, 1,000 people. This not very many people listening to them, but we have 100 of them that are all on this subject. And so we're going to sell this group of podcasts to Amazon or whatever. We're going to sell advertising on this big group. So basically, they're doing the big media buys. But and you can get involved in these kind of lump things, and so Podtrac is really neat because you get the analytics and they're really good analytics, and you get the potential involvement in making some income off of what you're doing.
Yeah, and if you're hosting video, good package, and you're hosting it yourself, there's a company called Uyala that has a really good system. So they have an Adobe Air application which helps you manage your content. Or your video.
Which one?
Uyala, Oyala. They're in your neck of the woods. They have a really good statistics system. So when I used to do video.
I know Uyala.
Yeah, you know those guys?
I don't.
Oh, they're great. So they have an Adobe Air front-end manager, and you throw stuff at the back, and the stats are great. They even tell you how much of your video, how many people have listened to 5% of it, 25% of it, 50% of it, 100% of it.
YouTube's hotspots.
Yeah, but it's the quality of the analytics, the package, because that's all they do, is really nice. Plus, I haven't used that part of it at all. They also have an ad system associated with it, which I've never bothered to work with.
How can they tell how much of a podcast?
Because it's all progressive download.
Okay.
But if you download it and put it on your mobile
device.
device.
So this is just streaming. So the only way you can get stuff from them is streaming.
They know.
Yeah, so you can't download. So it's just, it depends on what medium you decide to use. So it's kind of different. Which I actually had a question for Kiki, which was live.
Live. I do everything live.
We are live over there, and I was watching. She was with Leo Laporte at CES, where they were doing live, and of course the high quality post live thing, and of course that's high end equipment. But it's almost easier to do live today than to do recorded stuff, because with live people do tolerate lack of quality to some extent. Right now we aren't there yet where people want 720p live. We'll get there very soon. But that's another interesting thing. In a perfect world, if I had an iPhone 3GS, I'd be going around this event, taking 2-minute snap interviews with people, and then just immediately uploading them to YouTube or something like that.
Yeah. With the iPhone, there's this awesome. If you want to do video, there's this awesome new product called the Owly, and it's like a case for your iPhone. Your iPhone snaps right into it. There is a lens that goes over the lens that's on the camera. There is an attachment for a flash. And it's like a handle, and it also has a mic out attachment, so that you can it's like a little recording rig, and so because of the handles, it makes it more stable, so that you get rid of the jitter problem with video.
Yes, that's for the one that does video, right?
Yeah, for the iPhone that does video.
I have a 3G, so
I have a 3G
I can't do
too.
it. Yeah.
But I think it's like 100. It's not a lot. It's called the Owly. I don't have an iPhone, so I'm jealous. But
yeah, but even all of you who are using Flips, Cisco owns Flips now, right? And they've already announced the next version of the Flips going to have built-in Wi-Fi, right? So you're going to be on your Flips and sending video around the world. I mean, it makes it really easy. And the other thing I would recommend, this little baby over here, or partly because it's cheap, but partly because it fits any way you want to, or a fancier one like that one. but a little, because cameras like to be steady. Get yourself a little.
These are called Gorilla
tripod.
Pod.
Yeah, this is called Gorilla Pod.
Gorilla Pod.
If you have a camera, get one.
That you can
Yeah.
build a little stabilizer.
Yeah.
And they make an iPhone version too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
So,
Other annoying question. Have you guys ever done any kind of like A/B testing? Done slightly different versions, or mainly the different versions of this, essentially the same podcast, and try and figure out, maybe you're introduced to looking at trying a podcast that's a slightly faster pace, or maybe it's got a music sting at the start, and just seeing what effect that has on listenership levels, and then posting it and looking at the stats to see if what works. What if the more people pick this? News organisations do this with different headlines.
Yeah.
They'll have the same story, but they'll have two different headlines, and they'll put them up on the web, and they'll track in real time what's happening with seeing how much readership you
I have
get.
anecdotal evidence. When I use chlamydia in my headline, it really. We called it karmic chlamydia koalas, and that episode. No, what I played with the format changes. So we went from having a monologue to what we ended up often going into rat hole, where we had 10 topics to talk about, and we just talk about that and then just basically stay there. What that would mean is only, even within our niche audience, there would be a niche audience, which is not probably the right thing to do. What we've tried to do, and that sort of work is be a little more predictable in the format, where people know, okay, if I'm not interested in science, I'm only interested in programming, the first 20 minutes I don't need to listen to. So something like that. That's what I've played. And I think that works. And I guess you might have done some more experimentation.
What would be a typical length for a two-person? Where you kind of thing I was on was like, I don't know how long it lasted, but I was on maybe 10 minutes. And, but how long would be a typical length for a podcast where you have two people in there and they're talking back and forth, whatever they're doing?
There is no typical length, and that's the one thing that, because it's a podcast, it can be an indeterminate length. I do an hour-long program because initially my show is broadcast on the radio, and then so I have an hour time slot to fill. But I have people contacting me all the time going, why can't you do a longer show? We want more. And then I have other people who say, can you cut your show up into little tiny chunks, because I don't want to listen to an hour, I just want little 5-minute segments. It really comes down to who your audience is, because your audience is, depending on who they are, whether they're commuters and they're going someplace and they have a long time to listen, or they're at the gym and they are on the exercise bike or whatever for a long time. Those people maybe have more time to listen to a podcast than somebody who's like at their lunch break or whatever and just wants a real quick little thing.
But for a science podcast, that's what I presume what you do, right? A science podcast.
Yeah.
And are you able to sustain it for an hour? Is that?
Yeah. So I have.
Is that? I've done a bunch of radio shows for other people I haven't really doing it, but. We do for an hour, but there's all kinds of breaks in there when it's commercial radio. So we're really not on the air for an hour. We're on the air for far less than how much.
Right, they're smaller chunks. I have 2 shows. This Week in Science is the radio show, and This Week in Science, usually the first half of the show we have news segments, and so we basically have stories that are recent in the news, and we talk about them, and each story comes out about like 5 to 10 minutes depending on the topic, and so we go back and forth, and we get like 3 to 4, usually about 4 shows into the first half hour, and so each one of those is kind of its own thing. And then the second half of the show I plan sometimes on an interview or a longer segment, and that I usually plan to be about 20 minutes. My second show is Dr. Kiki's Science Hour, and that is an hour-long in-depth interview with a scientist on one specific topic. And
1 hour.
For 1 hour, because what I see is a lack of programming that allows people in the media to really talk to scientists. Because in the media, what you see are sound bites. What you get are little short things. Even on the radio shows, you don't have enough time to really get into stuff, and your messages are always packaged. And so what I'm trying to do with the Science Hour is really allow for a long, in-depth conversation to allow things to come out that maybe wouldn't normally come out or come up.
Yeah, is that show is doing well in terms of?
Yeah, right. We just launched it as a podcast in the end of November, and we have 20,000, 30,000 weekly downloads.
And quite honestly, like we started at 34 minutes, because